Good morning. My name is Dr. Kai Kennedy. My preferred pronouns are she, her, and hers. I'm an associate professor in the Department of Physical Therapy and Rehabilitation Science at the University of California, San Francisco. Most of you know that about me already, so I'd like to share some things that you don't know. My name, Kai, is the Hawaiian word for the sea. I'm a Scorpio, and I like long walks on the beach. It's true. I've spent most of my life living within a couple hours' drive to the beach. Both my parents had an affinity for the water. When they met in college, my mom was a lifeguard, and my dad, who was an offensive guard on the football team, was also on the swimming and diving team. Though stereotypes might have you think otherwise, we are water people. I've always loved to walk barefoot in the sand and marvel at the meeting of the land and the sea, and of the sea and the sky. And recently, I moved to California, where every night I get to look out of my living room window, past the bayside shoreline and a smattering of yachts and sailboats on the water, to watch the sunset over the Golden Gate Bridge. To be fair, most mornings are met with a blanket of dense fog that virtually defines the very notion of gray, but every night I get to watch the sky transform from a wild, bright blue to a glowing palette of oranges and pinks and purple, while the sun waxes in its approach toward the horizon. I've been known to plan an entire evening around this event, and I've said during many otherwise insignificant moments, if there ever comes a day when I'm not awestruck by this vision, you'll know there is something terribly wrong. I'd like to speak with you today about the shorelines, about storms, and about the horizon. Let's talk about leadership for uncertain times. Wise people once defined leadership for me as accepting responsibility for enabling others to achieve shared purpose during times of uncertainty. Like many of you, I've dedicated my life's work to enabling others. Like many of you, I accepted this responsibility with the basic mission of wanting to help people. It was a profound desire I had to define my own self-worth with a haltingly basic strategy to be of use to someone else. Through an amalgamation of my exposure to science and the arts, my fascination with the malleability of human performance, and my quest for professional identity, I was led to a career in physical therapy, where shared purpose is clear: to optimize movement, to minimize pain, and to restore function or improve performance. Both my patients and I want to do whatever needs to be done to help them live their best lives. In this career, I can regularly bear witness to physical interpretations of achievement, those successive moments where disabilities become abilities. As my desire to help people has evolved, I've been led to academia, where I can teach others to apply their passions to a career in physical therapy. In the classroom, my students and I also share purpose: to equip each with the knowledge and skill necessary to successfully practice physical therapy. In both the clinic and in the classroom, the achievements of patients and students are often accompanied by a process of self-actualization. It is the maturation of identity, confidence, and self-worth. As I progress along my career trajectory, I have become more aware of the process of self-actualization in my own journey. It has become my mission to highlight the role of functional movement as an indicator of health across populations. In a global society where health is often reduced to a litany of biomarkers, this is certainly no small task. It involves restructuring of health systems, the healthcare workforce, funding mechanisms, public perceptions, and no doubt the very notion of health. However, I've learned during this fellowship and across my career that purpose, like the horizon, is a beautiful vision that exists somewhere off in the distance. It's an unmatched phenomenon that inspires awe and exerts a certain pull. In one moment, purpose can both magnify us and humble us. It calls us to action, and it also reminds us of our place in this world. Purpose. It stirs passion. It births determination, and when shared, it creates bonds. Purpose, like the horizon, can be found at all vantage points. It can be approached from any side. It can be seen over mountains and at the ends of flat lands. It exists beyond where seas touch skies. Purpose is the home of all rainbows. It surrounds us, and purpose, like the horizon, remains in the distance. This world is not flat. Purpose is the something we can always reach toward. 4 weeks ago, there was trouble in paradise. Literally. Lots of troubles, in fact. Full-blown catastrophes. At least 150,000 acres of scorched land. At least 10,000 incinerated homes. At least 85 lives lost. And hundreds more that may never be found in Paradise, California. My home is almost 200 miles, about 3 hours drive from Paradise. We were spared. However, the devastating news of the wildfires rolled into our lives like a dark cloud. In fact, a dark cloud of smoke from the campfire billowed in from the east, and I didn't even notice it until it obscured my precious West Coast sunset. The smoke from the campfire choked the entire Bay Area. With unrelenting force, it closed our schools. It canceled our plans. It locked us up. Have you ever had your vision blocked? Your plans canceled? Have you ever been blindsided? Have you ever had the wind kicked out of you? My fellow leaders, storms will come. There are opposing energies we've yet to meet. They are ever ready, powerful, relentless. To borrow from Newton, each of our actions should anticipate equal and opposite reaction. It's a law of nature. Storms will come. Even when you're focused on your vision, especially when you're focused. The storms may feel unpredictable. It may seem that the more you advance, the more frequent, the more intense, the more targeted the storms seek to destroy. It may seem that the closer you get to your goal, the more erratic the opposing forces become. But there's a secret that every physical therapist knows. We were built for this. We were designed for uncertain times. Each of us was created with a set of information-gathering senses and force-generating power. We are able to respond to threats, despite the irregularity of their timing, intensity, or direction. We were designed for dynamic balance, and we must employ it in our leadership efforts. We must employ it in uncertain times. Balance involves the equal distribution of forces that allow someone or something to remain upright or steady, to maintain equilibrium. At rest, balance is static, and we are able to maintain our state of rest. But my fellow leaders, we are not in a state of rest. We are in the fight for health equity. We are in a movement. We are a movement. Our collective power is building, and there are forces of oppositions we need to steel ourselves to withstand, to overcome. We need our balance to be dynamic. We need to engage with difference. We need to confront notions of superiority. We need to wrestle with perils of poverty and social exclusion. We need to be prepared for barricades and brick walls. We must prepare ourselves for the weight of antiquity and the perpetuity of stillness. We must distribute our force such that we can remain upright and steady in our march toward social justice. In order to move forward, we must remain centered. In physics, the center of mass is the mean position of matter in a body or a system. One source tells us that the term is sometimes used interchangeably with the center of gravity. It refers to a unique point that can be used to describe a system's response to external forces. Another source explains that the center of mass is a specific point at which the system's mass behaves as if it were concentrated. A third describes a point where if force is applied, the body moves, but without rotating, without turning. I ask each of you to consider, what is your center? From what are you not willing to turn away? Some years ago, when my youngest niece was learning to walk, I marveled at her learning process. The youngest of 5, she was eager to keep up with her sisters. With determination, she attempted to move her tiny feet at just the right pace to keep up with the weight of her torso as it moved full speed ahead. Feet too slow, and she would end up on her hands and knees. Feet too fast, and she landed right on her backside. It was a cycle of trial and error, and trial and success. She oscillated between dependence and independence, between frustration and jubilance. PTs often describe walking as a controlled cycle of falling forward and of recovery. Walking involves us purposefully advancing our center of mass while negotiating the forces, in that case of gravity and ground. It is more difficult, walking is, when the ground gives way, like a trampoline or soggy mud. It is more difficult if the ground is uneven, like a hike through the wilderness. Walking is more difficult when you are carrying extra weight, like a backpack, and even more so if that weight moves, like a child. Each of these things requires us to respond with accurate timing and amplitude so as to maintain ourselves upright. Achieving center and remaining true to it requires us to journey within, to understand our values, and to define our limits. We must know our strengths and our limitations, our interests and our resources, our capabilities and our boundaries. We must understand where our edges meet our needs. Only then can we maneuver that which is under our control. Only then can we share our action plan. Only then can we distribute our force. If we are to move forward, we must carefully consider our limits, the shorelines beyond which our values can no longer support us. If we are to remain upright in our journeys, we must employ dynamic balance. We must center ourselves, remaining supported when possible. And we must steel ourselves to respond to the inevitable and yet unpredictable external forces that oppose our efforts. We must be prepared to weather the storms that challenge our efforts and remember that the horizons we desire are still lying beyond those clouds. You know, last week I walked over to the Bay Shore to watch the sunset for the first time in a month. The air is much clearer now, and people can be outside without looking like post-apocalyptic bandits. A young parent jogged with a stroller. A child played fetch with her dog. An old couple held hands. The boats are back on the water, now decorated with holiday lights. I felt like I was breathing more deeply than ever, like I was breathing in relief and gratitude and appreciation, like I could smell the salt from the sea in the air. It's not lost on me that the difference between that sunset and the one a month prior was the absence of campfire smoke. It's not lost on me that the smoke was pushed out by a rainstorm. Not lost that the rainstorm came to a state where rain is so rare that 96% of its residents live in drought. It's not lost on me that the rainstorm, just like the smoke, came unexpectedly from beyond the horizon. It's not lost that the rainstorm restored my vision, that the rainstorm saved our lives. I encourage you, my fellow leaders, each of you, my fellow fellows, to cherish your shorelines, to welcome your storms, and to never lose sight of your horizons. Thank you.